rise of a Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, with India Today magazine. His new book on Savarkar is creating waves as it presents an entirely new perspective on Savarkar and his efforts to prevent the partition. Before being appointed as the Central Information Commissioner, Shri Mahurkar has had a 33-year tenure with India Today magazine. He made nationwide headlines with his first book release in 2014, namely Center Stage, Inside the Narendra Modi Model of Governance. His thought-provoking articles on national security and other national-related issues can also be found on India Today's group web platform, Daily O. I would like to call him on stage. Please come on stage, sir. Our second speaker is the journalist and documentary filmmaker Rohit Gandhi. He is the editor-in-chief of World in One News, one of my favorite platforms, and DNA India. His documentary on Afghanistan won the Emmy Award in the editing category. He has spent 3 decades in being a frontline journalist covering war zones and managing newsrooms thereafter. He uses journalism as a tool to prevent global conflict and spread positivity. He has some highest honors like the Edward R. Murrow, the DuPont Award, just to name a few. He currently uses artificial intelligence to help organizations look at open intelligence. Please come on stage, sir. Mr. Rohit Gandhi. He'll be just here in a couple of minutes. Welcome, sir. So let us start with our session, Savarkar as the pioneer of India's national security.
Audio test. Full apologies. I was sitting back in the green room waiting for sir to come, but anyways, now we are here. You know, who doesn't know about Mr. He's such a well talked about journalist. He certainly has had access to a fair amount of the present administration over the last 35 years of his career. Obviously, he's done phenomenally well in laying the task at the Information Commission as well. Now, you wrote 2 books around Modi's governance. Those were the first 2 books. This is your 3rd book. Talks about Savarkar and its historical perspective on how he could be the security strategist for India and what it should have ideally been a security strategist for India. Let me start by first going to page 75. You write and criticize Indian nationalism and quote unquote Savarkar, Indian nationalism, a creation of the colonial Hindu mind, is not synonymous with Hindu nationalism because the former denies or does not appreciate India's glorious past. Can you help explain that a bit?
लाइटें अगर ऑन करानी हो याली तो उससे
We had a session yesterday on history. Were you there? Revisiting history.
Yes, I can.
This is more or less the same question, I thought.
many things I can talk about. But I gave one example yesterday. You see, Gujarat is an essentially Vaishnav state. It's the forte of Vaishnavism. For them, Dwarka is the most important place. Dwarka, which is associated with Lord Krishna. Now, we had a medieval sultan called Mahmud Shah Begada. Be means two in Gujarat. He conquered two forts from two Rajput rulers. Junagadh from Ram Mandlik and Pavagadh from Batai Rawal alias Jai Singh. His real name was Jai Singh Chauhan. And he was an ancestor of our Congress leader Digvijay Singh Ji. Now, Begada is sold as a hero of Gujarat. I am yet to come across any criticism in newspapers or magazines about Muhammad Begada. Muhammad Begada is that ruler, Muslim ruler, who had destroyed both Somnath and Dwarka. There is no Muslim ruler who has destroyed both Somnath and Dwarka. Most of the invaders, they destroyed Somnath, not Dwarka. And yet he is worshipped as a great figure in Gujarat, by even Vaishnavites. Now, Jai Singh Chauhan was the ruler who defeated to conquer Pavagadh, which is known as Pavagadh, a place, it's a hill, near Baroda. It took 20 months to conquer that place, and he conquered it only after some people committed treachery with Jai Singh Chauhan. He was captured alive, and there is a Johor also there. Rajput women and Hindu women ended their lives by self-immolation. And there was a Johor there. But he was caught alive. He was brought before Muhammad Begada, and Muhammad Begada told them, you convert to Islam. He said, look here, I cannot betray my ancestors. I will not change my religion, you can kill me. But Begada wanted the entire population to convert to Islam. And he thought, what better way, if the king converts, then entire population will convert in one day. So he gave him 6 months. Spoke to him about the virtues of Islam. And gave him 6 months. You decide in 6 months. He was kept very well during those 6 months in order to induce him to accept Islam, but he did not. After 6 months, he was brought before the Begada, and he said, look here, I stick to my earlier decision. I cannot betray my ancestors. And he was killed. Today the rulers of Baria, Chota Udeipur, these are small states in Gujarat. They are all descendants of Jai Singh. My question is, who should be the hero of Gujarat? Should it be Muhammad Begada? Or should it be Jai Singh Chauhan, who sacrificed his life for his religion? So that is what I am talking about. I think with one example is there in my book also. I have tried to answer your question.
I'll come to this bit later. I have a, later part of the book you talk about something else again, which is slightly disconnected with Hindu nationalism, and Savarkar's talk about Indian nationalism. I'll come to that later. But your book covers says Sri Savarkar could have prevented partition. Why didn't he? Why couldn't he?
I will take some time to reply, but I think it's a very...
How much time do you have? You have 35 minutes or?
You see, Savarkar was the first person to see that partition is coming in 1937, 10 years before it happened. Now, what was the evidence before him? Nobody thought like him, except there is one Hindu Mahasabha leader, B.S. Munche. These were the only two people who thought that Pakistan can happen in 1937. Now, what was the evidence? This evidence was there before the nation. 1930, Sir Muhammad Iqbal, the author of Saale Jahan Se Acha, he had become a pan-Islamist, radical Islamist. He was dreaming of an Islamic world. In the 1930 session of Prayagraj, Allahabad, Muslim League session, he had joined Muslim League. He said that I visualize future homeland of Muslims in what is today's Sindh, Northwest Frontier Province, Punjab, and Balochistan, practically today's Pakistan, if you leave aside the Indian side of Punjab. In 1932, Rahmat Ali Chaudhry, Gujar Muslim from Punjab, I think from Jalandhar or Ludhiana, he was studying in Oxford, and he was also a votary of a separate homeland for Muslims. During the second World Table Conference, Round Table Conference, he floated a paper, now or never. This is the right time to demand Pakistan, otherwise it will never get it. In that he coined the word Pakistan. He is the coiner of the word Pakistan. And from there, Jinnah picked it up. And Jinnah was the person who gave shape to this vision of those who wanted separate homeland for Muslims. Correct. Now in 1936, Sindh was part of Mumbai province. It was detached from Sindh, from Mumbai province. That time Savarkar issued a statement. In 1937, Savarkar was in politics. He said detachment of Sindh from Mumbai province is the first step towards realizing the dream of Muslim separatists. And therefore it is an Anglo-Muslim conspiracy. That is what he said. Now, when Savarkar was free to join any party, he got an offer from Subhash Chandra Bose, Achyutrao Patwardhan, and S.M. Joshi, these three Congress leaders, that you join Congress. He said, and the explanation which he gave is very important for us to understand. He said, Congress is indulging in Muslim appeasement at the cost of Hindu rights. In Bharatvarsha, to indulge in appeasement of Muslims at the cost of Hindu rights is betrayal of the nation. And Congress has gone so far ahead on this path that it is impossible for it to retrace its steps. And then he said, it is better to stand in the last row of true patriots than the first row of those who are betraying the nation in the name of patriotism or nationalism. And he chose to join a small party like Hindu Mahasabha. Now, he and Hindu Sabha did not agree on everything, but it was the only party which was not, sacrificing Hindu rights at the altar of Muslim rights. Now, in the 1937 speech, where he took over as president in Karnavati, what we call Ahmedabad today, he expounded the principles, spoke on the principles of Hindu nationalism. The essence of that speech was that Hindu nationalism means equal treatment for all and equal rights for all. Hindu Mahasabha is not demanding special rights for Hindus or separate rights for Hindus. It is very clear in that speech, which is often twisted to portray, depict Savarkar as a separatist or as a divisive figure. Correct. In that he said, that time Jinnah had already made the demand that Vande Mataram is idol worship and Muslims will not sing Vande Mataram. It violates the principles of Islam. That time, in 1937 December, Congress stand was that we will not compromise on Vande Mataram. But Savarkar said, look here, whatever Congress might say, it will compromise in future. After 8 months, Vande Mataram was reduced to 2 stanzas, 2 paras, just to appease Muslims. Now we go further. Thereafter, Savarkar ran a whirlwind campaign across the country for almost 7 years, telling Congress that you are on the wrong path. Your Muslim appeasement at the cost of Hindu rights will have very disastrous consequences for the nation. It could lead to even partition. And on the other hand, he was warning the people of this country, particularly the youth. This continued for years together. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Ahmedabad to Assam, he toured almost every place. And a stage came in the early 40s when Hindu Mahasabha started getting traction from the people. Now we come to Congress. On 23rd March 1940, Jinnah demanded separate homeland for Muslims at the Lahore session of Muslim League. On 6th April, within 15 days, Gandhiji wrote an article, Young Leader, a mouthpiece of Congress. In that he criticized the demand. But in the end he said that if 8 crore Muslims don't want to be part of this country, how can I stop them? Now it was factually incorrect. Because the day Jinnah leaders, let the nation know this. The day Jinnah demanded Pakistan, a separate homeland for Muslims, there were many Muslims in this country who were opposing Jinnah. So ideal strategy should have been for Gandhi and Congress to form an anti-Pakistan front comprising Congress, Hindu Mahasabha, and those Muslims who are opposing partition. Instead, Congress and Gandhi chose to deal with Jinnah only. The result was, within a very short time, Jinnah's stature started going up. And the stature of those who opposed the partition demand started going down. The result was that those leaders, in order to save their career, joined Jinnah in his partition demand. So I say partition was a self-goal. And partition happened because of two factors. One, the Hindu-Muslim unity model of Gandhiji, which was Hindu-Muslim unity at Hindu cost. And two, his principle of complete non-violence. Now his principle of complete non-violence is very different from the non-violence of Mahavir and Buddha. Mahavir and Buddha don't tell you to not to retaliate against those who attack you unprovoked. Gandhiji says कि आपको कोई मारता है तो मार खाते रहो. Jinnah was a barrister, he was a much successful lawyer than Gandhiji and Nehru for that matter. And he could see that this is my path. And therefore he started, if you see that phase, Muslim League started distributing riots in the country in order to force Congress to yield to their demand. Now, in 1942, what Congress said, what Gandhiji said, how can we prevent 8 crore Muslims from remaining with India if they don't want? It was officially stamped by Congress by passing the 1942 partition resolution, in which Congress said that those provinces who don't want to remain part of this country will have the right to self-determination. Hello. Those provinces who don't want to remain part of this country will have a right to self-determination. This was the resolution which Congress passed in 1942. At that time, Savarkar told Kripalani, he said, those who want to force partition on this country by staging a civil war, by threatening a civil war. Just imagine if tomorrow, if they have resources in their hands, if they have their own army, what they will do. And we are suffering this day. Thereafter, in 1945, Veer Savarkar organized the Akhand Hindustan Conference in Delhi. Now, who are the people who participated in the conference? Those who are charging Savarkar with being divisive, just on the basis of few language or words which he used. Correct? Those who participated in the conference had the greatest intellectuals of this country. Ramanand Chatterjee, the editor of Modern Review, the India Today of that time. Correct. Radhakupal Mukherjee, the greatest historian of that time. Srinivas Shastri. All these people were part of the Hindustan Conference in 1945, and they said that what Jinnah is saying is correct, what Savarkar is saying is correct. Savarkar is only opposing partition, Savarkar is only opposing Muslim appeasement at the cost of Hindu rights, and he is fighting for equal rights. But now you will say, how can you say that Savarkar could have prevented partition? Now what happened? In 1945, when the elections were announced, when the elections were announced, Congress in a very dirty game, as part of their strategy, same party which had agreed to the right to give the right to self-determination to the provinces, wouldn't want to remain with India. He said that we'll fight for united India. This was just a ploy to hoodwink the Hindus. And that had a very salutary effect on the masses because Congress was a big party. It had a leader like Gandhi who could relate to the people, who could relate to the poor people, and he had some positive work to show also. So the support which Hindu Mahasabha had gained evaporated in a few days, and Congress won with a huge majority in the 1945 Central Assembly election and the Provincial Assembly election.
So what you're saying is that he could have prevented partition, but he was incapable of convincing the youth of the country then that...
No, he failed because he was in a smaller party. Congress had a leader like Gandhi who could relate, who had a great model of poverty elimination, of inclusive social reform, his idea of Gram Swaraj. Gandhi had many things to offer you. He was connected with the people of this country.
Absolutely.
And he was populist. Savarkar was not populist. Savarkar used to use language which is very, very harsh. I said in a tropical country, if you use harsh language, you cannot be an undisputed leader. That is what
You can't go that far.
historian is saying.
So, very interesting. You talk a lot about the six glorious epochs of Indian history. There are a lot of references in the book. I'm going to read a few out.
Certainly.
Savarkar says that part of the security strategy talks about using sexual violence as a political tool. I will extrapolate what I'm saying. Page 179, paragraph 451. Them like that. Let those sultans and their peers take a fright that in the event of a Hindu victory, our molestation and detestable lot shall be avenged on Muslim women. Once they are haunted with this dreadful apprehension, the Muslim women too stand in the same predicament. In the case of Hindus win, the future Muslim conquerors will never dare to think of such molestation of Hindu women. Page 180, just if I may please. Paragraph 455. Suppose if from the earliest Muslims' invasion of India, the Hindus also, whenever they were victors of the battlefield, had decided to pay the Muslim fair sex in the same coin, or punish them in other ways, then this horrible apprehension at their heart, they would have desisted from the evil designs against any Hindu lady. This is the last one. Paragraph 457 of the book. But haunted with the fantastic idea of chivalry to enemy women and a blind eye to time, place or person, the Hindus of that period never tried to chastise the Muslim women folk for their wrongs to Hindu women, even when the former were many a time completely at their mercy. Can you, help us understand
This is the harsher side
references?
of Savarkar. I don't entirely agree. He has questioned even Shivaji for that.
Correct.
Shivaji used to show that chivalry. Now you see,
Shivaji and one more, somebody else along with Shivaji.
Shivaji suddenly. Now you see, you have to look at the mind of Savarkar. Certainly I don't agree with this. You see, the kind of rapes on Hindu women which are committed during the partition riots, you can't imagine. I mean, the evidence is chilling. I mean, in Punjab, even in Noakhali, in Calcutta, even the Calcutta, that 2-3 day thing, lots of women were raped. So I think he was reacting to that kind of behavior on the part of Muslims in a modern age. I think it was an overreaction. And
When was this written? I'm sorry, I just want to put context. What year was this book written?
this was in 45, 46. Maybe he has written before that. But then this was happening even earlier also. It has continued. The history relate with Tipu Sultan for the ruler of, I forget the place, that Brahmin ruler. All his women were forced into his harem. As late as Tipu Sultan, just 200 years old. So he was reacting to that, and this was happening, I am saying this was happening even in 1945-46. This happened in Kohat also, in 1924. So while agreeing that this was an overreaction and he should not have expressed such thoughts, we have to understand the state of his mind.
was wondering, since
No,
you
see,
know,
the funniest part is that there is an attempt to hide or keep silent on the atrocities committed by the invaders. And same people want to raise Savarkar is not committed it. He's only talking about it. So this is basically the betrayal of the majority community by those people who want to raise this question without admitting what had happened to the Hindus during the medieval period.
so might come back around this. Is I was wondering, since most of what Savarkar wrote could be true in certain ways, but at the same time it is based in a time which we move forward, many years ahead of that. So the atrocities by Muslim, invaders on Hindu is a reality, which not as a hidden, it's in history. We've seen it, we've seen partition, absolutely. Now when a person like Savarkar who writes in a way that is very convincing, if read by the youth of the country today, in what ways would they appropriate the text in action today? Could it lead to Muslim women of today paying the price of the atrocities on Hindus in the past?
Then we should talk about every religion. Gandhi was doing experiments of celibacy. He was sleeping with his own grandniece.
So
I've done a story for
understand.
that.
I
I've done a
understand.
story for that today. Manu Ben and Gandhi. There was a story in India today. So, every leader, if you go into that, then it is endless. Best part is to take the good part of it. We try to ignore the part which we can't follow.
So what do you say?
The exchange between Sardar Patel and Gandhiji on this experiment?
Correct.
I got a letter which India Today did not allow me to publish properly. The kind of intellectual dishonesty which is going on in this country, in that story, there's one letter which I produced where it was put on the online edition, but not in the mail, which was the crux of that story. Sardar writes to Gandhiji, I am sitting with Dedas, and I am told you have again started to the experiments. He had stopped in between, and after, Sardar Patel and others told him what to do. He's again, by restarting these experiments, Bapu, you have thrown us into agony of bone fire. It's a very strong language there. Now all these things are sought to be brushed under the carpet. My point is that why these things are not raised. Even I could raise this because Gandhi accepted that story. I have not done it in my book. I could have done it. Point is that every leader has some negative side. And Savarkar spoke about cow, which was not proper.
So what you're saying, sir, again, let's go back to your book here. So what you're saying is that even though Savarkar wrote about this, and if we keep repeating this to the youth of today, it may actually have a very adverse impact on the present time where Muslim women can get impacted by, people, if they may appropriate some of this thought. You think it can have a negative impact?
I don't.
Do you think Muslim women can get attacked today for what?
Not
their
at all. Not
ancestors
at all.
did in the
Not
past?
even one Muslim woman will get attacked. It's a civilized world, and people will understand when there are people like me to tell the people that, look here, he was in this state of mind and he was saying this where I don't agree with him.
On page 251, you mention Savarkar's criticism towards Hindus fighting in solace in other faiths. You write, he, Savarkar, was of the view that conversion from Hindus was denationalization. However, on page 253, you describe Savarkar's notion of nationalism as unalloyed nationalism, right? In which caste, religion, and regional pride are secondary to national pride. These two statements are contradicting. We discussed this earlier, where I talked about Hindu nationalism.
I mean, you see, now, Savarkar was partially correct, not fully correct in this. I mean, in Northeast, for example, now you see that, because of a very broad-based approach by the center, the problem of Christian separatism has come down. Correct? But it was there. It was there. Demands have come, separatist demands have mostly come from, they are religion-based,
Right.
That is what he's saying. But let me come to his Hindutva. In Hindutva, the last page is very important. Last 2 pages of Hindutva is his magnum opus. He says, a day will come when the world will have to face the force of Hindutva and the force of these 30 crore Hindus. That time the population was 30 crores. But then he defines how Hindus will deal with the rest of the world when it accepts the superiority of the Hindus, of India for that matter. He says, the way it will deal will not be different from what has been said in Gita or what has been told by Gautam Buddha. So in the end, he talks about Vasudev Kundubukam. He brings also Tukaram in the end.
So, was there ethnocentrism in his thought in terms of, I lived in China for a while. One of the, cornerstones of their existence is what they describe as Chunghwa, in the center of the world. So do you think Savarkar's writings as well had some of this ethnocentrism that we should be possibly the ones who will show the path to the rest of the world?
That is what Hindutva is all about. I mean, you just see, look at Sri Lanka. The turmoil which Sri Lanka is undergoing, China has also played a small part in that. And the terms on which India has extended loans to Sri Lanka are very different. They are in the nature of a friend helping a friend. What Savarkar is trying to say, or all those who talk about Vishwaguru, what they are trying to say. You have to understand this. What they are trying to say, that when India becomes a superpower, it will not behave like other superpowers like China and America. China has been exploiting African nations like anything. India will deal with them as one large family. It will see the world as one large family. And that is what Savarkar also said in the last page of Hindutva.
Right.
One more thing. There is a section of ultra Hindus who criticize or who condemn Akbar also. I don't. I personally believe that after 300 years of atrocities on Hindus, if Akbar was the ruler who stopped temple destruction, who stopped abduction of Hindu women, who withdrew jizya tax, then he deserves some good marks, maybe 60 out of 100. I might give him 75, correct? Now Savarkar, to my utter surprise, when I was doing this book, he has been very positive about Akbar and Dara Shikoh.
And let's talk about the democracy that Savarkar kind of envisaged. Page 247, 248. He talks about, the discontentment with the term opposition party. And you talk greatly about it. As per your book, Savarkar associates this term with British Parliament and calls for people to disown the same. Right? He further proposes that the term minority party to be used instead as the party that will not gain enough votes to be in power, not to be in opposition to the ruling party, but at a mutual understanding wherein the minority party can act as vigilantes, making sure the ruling party does not go against the well-being of the country. So, Savaristic, if you want to call it, notions of democracy for benefit of all 1.34 billion Indians, how we can take that forward? The goal of Savarism and the Modi government, is there some alignment with it? Do you think there is, and there's been a lot of talk about a single party rule, changing the way India's democracy is structured. Do you think there is that journey happening today?
A difficult answer to question. Difficult question to answer, What Savarkar said, I think holds a lot of strength even today, I mean, the entire perspective of opposition changes when you look at it the way Savarkar wants you to look. I think if that is adopted, it will be good for the Indian democracy.
Interesting. So, when you look at Savarkar's, strategy as, being almost somebody who should be described as the strategist for India, security strategist, he wasn't able to convince the youth then. Somebody who was incapable of convincing a population then at a time when it was most required. Do you think today, and I know you've written it in your book as well, where you talk about, Nehru was somebody who, was put on the throne in the past, but today he seems to have, being dethroned at some level. And Savarkar, who didn't get any light of day then, based on
when I talk about Savarkar, I talk about national security.
Correct. And national security didn't get the light of day. Basically, people didn't accept the ideas. Do you think if he wasn't able to convince then, should we now take that text and say, but this should be today really a part of who we are?
We are already doing it. My first chapter is Dawn of the Savarkar era. Rule back of 370 is dawn of the Savarkar era. Ram Mandir is dawn of the Savarkar era. I very strongly feel so. Look at the Places of Worship Act. Muslims destroyed hundreds and thousands of temples during medieval period. There a section of Muslims forced partition on this country. And thereafter you bring an act where even the 5-10 good places, the most important places of Hindus are not given back to them. Somnath also was opposed by Jawaharlal Nehru. He was not very happy about it. At least, I don't agree with those people who say that we want all the 3,300 or 33,000 temples which were converted into mosques back. I am not supporter of that demand. At least 5-10 places should come back. At least Krishna Janmabhoomi and your Kashi Vishwanath should come back. I mean, can there be a religious reconciliation without self-introspection? There is no self-introspection on the part of the Muslim leadership, at least, not common people. So I want to take it further. Now, you see, I have described Savarkar, me and my co-author Chirayu Pandit, as Savarkar as father of India's national security. Now, we have very strong reasons. Now, what you are saying is that because Savarkar was wrongly involved in the Gandhi murder by Nehru, and Savarkar then withdrew. He was a heartbroken person. For 19 years of his life, he was not a pariah, but political pariah for that matter. Correct? But that he had continued to share his vision with the country. Now, in 1952, when he saw that China, which came into being in 1948, has gone ahead of India, overtaken India militarily, he issued a warning in 1952, first warning. He said, look here, China has overtaken India. Our ordnance factories are processing tea instead of making weapons. This is a very horrible situation. This can lead to a disaster. And that time he has advocated India should become a nuclear nation. In 1952, which we became 25 years later, correct? In 54, when Jawaharlal Nehru came up with the principle of Panchsheel, saying that if these 5 principles are followed by India and the neighboring countries, they will be able to live in peace. That time Savarkar said, look here, talking to China in such weak terms is very dangerous. China is a communist country, and I won't be surprised if you have this kind of attitude towards China after what it has done to Tibet. I won't be surprised if China attacks India and swallows India's land, which happened in 1962. So he predicted 62 in 54. Correct? Then another statement he says that Jawaharlal Nehru, your Panchsheel is beads of the rosary. माला मंत्र करने की माला उसके जो बीड्स होते हैं मन के, whereas China's Panchsheel is bombs, machine gun, it is submarine, correct? And that time he talked about 2 principles which are very integral to this government also today. He said, on the global map, no 2 nations can be permanent friends or permanent enemies. Their relationship is decided by their needs. Correct? And second, he said, howsoever great a nation might be military, culturally and economically, but if it is not a great nation militarily, then it cannot become a superpower. He said, what he meant was that military strength is the ultimate decider of a nation's greatness. Correct? Now today, the best example is Taliban. Taliban prides itself in calling itself as protector of puritanical Islam across the world, correct? In Sikhian, right across the border of Afghanistan, China is committing untold atrocities on the Uyghurs. They are not allowed to read namaz. They are not allowed to keep beard. In many areas, they are kept in certain camps, correct? And yet, Taliban does not have the guts to take on China.
So I think two parts. Since I was in China and I've spent time in Sichuan, not Sichuan, Xinjiang. They certainly practice their religion. It's not as if there isn't, but obviously there has been a whole effort to bring in Hans there and establish. So I think also the atrocities are maybe a little more pronounced when we talk about it, not as much on the ground. But I have two other questions specifically focused on our book. Now, one of the things, is there an effort to, both Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi both had a very large role to play in India's independence. Is it essential to dethrone them both in a certain manner, to bring the Savarkarism in play or his security strategy in play? He was another thought leader. Why is it essential to dethrone them to bring this in?
No, not dethrone. You have to criticize him in terms of national security only. I don't think.
Okay. But
now
you
Nehru,
do write about it.
Nehru
right?
was a great institution builder. I have said this.
But you also write that there's a time that leaders take precedence and then sooner or
he
later
has,
they
he has
come
paid
down.
a price for his policies on national security.
But
Now, what has happened in the last 8 months, 8 years? Why it could not have happened earlier? 370 is a shining example of that. What I am saying. So when talking about Gandhi and Nehru, we are talking only about their national security thing, not others, not other things.
But
Gandhi had a great.
You're willing to ignore Savarkar's challenges, but you obviously highlight Mahatma Gandhi's challenges.
No.
Right?
Because you have highlighted Savarkar's challenges. I have to do it.
Okay.
But I
One last question.
I believe in Savarkar.
Right.
With all his minuses, his national security vision is essential for this country if it wants to become a great nation.
I feel India is a lovely country, with its diversity, with the people it is, and so I value anybody who contributes to the idea of that India. My last question, sir, I know it's a little controversial, I'll still ask it. Now, there has been a lot of writing around it. Tell me if there is any truth to it. I don't know. I haven't done enough research to, get down to the bottom of it. It's talked about that Godse visited Savarkar a week before he attacked Mahatma Gandhi, and possibly the weapons he procured. Suggestions been made. It's been written a couple of places. How true is that? Was it Godse in direct connection with the Savarkar? Did they meet? Did they have?
He was in a direct connection. But Godse had started opposing Savarkar in his last days. Godse said that, the Barshi session of Barsi is a place. There the provincial Hindu Mahasabha units, session took place. It was after the formation of the cabinet in which Mukherjee was there, correct? Now, in that session, L.N. Bhupatkar, he was a Hindu Mahasabha leader, the person who defended Savarkar in the Gandhi trial, correct? In his speech, he said that a day will come where we might have to wind up Hindu Mahasabha. In some context, he said, Godse ran after him with a knife. It's recorded, So, Godse was a ultra nationalist, and towards the end, he was in disagreement with Veer Savarkar, totally. And I think the ultimate proof of the fact that Savarkar was hauled up in this case is Manohar Malgavkar's book, The Man Who Killed Gandhi, written in 1978. Malgavkar was no Hindutva person as such. He went and met Digambar Badge, the person who had turned Apurvar and on whose statement Savarkar was arrested on this charge. Badge said, I had given that statement under pressure from the then government.
Good. All right. Thank you very much. The floor is open, I guess, if somebody has a question. I'm sure many people have a question.
We thank you for this insightful session on Savarkar, and Sir's book will also be available at the Universal Studios store in the Ganga Lawns. Yes,
Hello.
we are open to questions now.
Hello, sir. Can I ask you a question here?
Sure, sure.
The question that I have here is, see, we are going through an economic dilemma, and this is not only prevalent in India, but it is across the globe, as we can witness it. So we talk about Ram Rajya, where we know that we had a lot of prosperity and there were no economic ill health that could have been witnessed, as much as I have read, and you may, I mean, obviously you know more than this. So do we have anything that was taken by him from those times, and can we use those times to, you know, eliminate or maybe cut down on the kind of problems that we are facing now? Because I think, as when we talk about
Can you
when we
be
talk about
slightly specific, you know?
yeah, my question to you is,
I'm
like,
not
when we
hearing
talk
you.
about, yeah, when we talk about, I'm sorry.
Ask a more simpler
I'm not
question so
hearing
that,
properly.
and come
Yeah.
forward, come ahead if you want,
Haan.
right?
Okay,
अब यहाँ आ जाइए
Just
सामने.
ask a more concise question so that he can give
okay,
you a
my
concise answer.
question is, I mean, I understand we talk about Hindutva, and you have gone ahead and talked about the atrocities that are being done and all those things, and yes, they stand a place there. My question is that, can we move ahead and talk about how we can come out, and as of now, the kind of economic dilemma that we are in, is there anything that we can take from there, and maybe that is where we can find some.
So I think what he's trying to
Thank you.
say is that historically all of those facts hold. You know, you talk about historically what happened through the, you know, invasions, etc. Hindu women. You know,
Can you leave it behind?
Can we leave it behind and focus today on, you know, making sure India financially succeeds, people are educated, there is health, there is food, there is shelter.
No, but that effort is being made. You see, I am exactly in the middle of this, you know, because I am a judge in the Central RTI court. I know very well now after 2 years, you know, where do we stand, what are the problems, you know. There is a bureaucracy which has been there for so many years. It takes time, but I don't think there is any lack of effort on the part of the central government or even the UP government for that matter to address the issues what you are saying. But certainly those who are indulging in ultra-nationalism, those who are trying to paint the entire Muslim community with one brush, they need to be contained. I very strongly feel so. My constituency is Hindutva constituency, but I am very clear about it that India is a multi-religious nation, and all prophets, all religions should be respected. I am very clear about it. So, while agreeing with you that we cannot allow such kind of ultra-nationalism to overshadow our immediate needs, economic needs, our economic vision, you
Instead
know.
of calling it ultra-nationalism, can we call it terrorism?
No, no, not at all, not at all, not at all. There is enough reason.
If you begin talking about
No,
killing
the-
people,
you-
if you begin talking about, you know, making sure to pay, they need to pay for historical wrongs, then can it go
No,
from
there is,
being-
you see, we are not talking about a raging pan-Islamic movement in this country. The number of Wahhabis who oppose Sufism, who oppose tomb worship, you know very well. You've been across the world, in Pakistan also, correct? Now their percentage at the time of independence was only 10%. Today they are 50%, 45 to 50%, as much as Sufis. I'm talking about the Sunnis only, not Shias. Correct? So Congress has allowed pan-Islamism to grow. It's a big challenge before us.
That's terrorism.
You see, that is actual terrorism. You see, there is a book called Taqwiyatul Iman. Let everybody know here. The nation doesn't know. There is a book called Taqwiyatul Iman. It is taught in all Wahhabi madrasas. Wahhabi means Deoband, Tabligh Jamaat, and Ahle Hadith. Even Nadwa for that matter, in Lucknow, correct? Now that book is the stepping stone to separatism. It condemns customs of all other religions. You know, now with such a challenge,
but when you-
with such a challenge in there, while controlling ultra-nationalism, we can't ignore these issues.
But you talked about Taliban in great light. You said isn't that terrorism as well?
Which one?
The Taliban, the Talibanization of Afghanistan. That's on the same lines. I can call it ultra-nationalism or you can call it terrorism. So you have to figure out what to call
No,
it.
you see,
everybody with the same
in
crutch,
ultra-nationalism, you see, you cannot equate the two. I'm very clear about it. I totally disagree with what you are trying to say.
Is Taliban
Absolutely.
terrorism
No,
or
there is no
ultra-nationalism?
comparison. Our people are overreacting. Overreacting because of 60 years, you know. Now, what I am saying is that this is a phase of national reawakening. What Narendra Modi did in Mahakaleshwar, why Congress could not do it? You get my point? There is no court issue involved in Mahakaleshwar or in Kashi corridor. Why they could not do it? Because they were under the influence of pan-Islamists. So this is an age of national reawakening. Had it started in 1947, when the ground was ready, because Vivekanand, Swami Paramananji, Dayanand Saraswati, and for that matter, Sri Aurobindo, they had prepared a ground for it. But Godse killed Gandhi. That became a weapon for those who were not exactly connected with the Indian roots to thrust their model on the nation. And one more thing, 47 partition happened. Two main reasons. One, as I understand, the Congress or Gandhi model of Hindu-Muslim unity at Hindu cost, and Congress's brand of complete non-violence. Correct? These were two reasons which led to partition broadly. Now, in 1957, within 10 years, Jawaharlal Nehru forges an alliance with the Kerala Muslim League in Kerala election, with the same people who had caused India's partition. So, what Hindus are doing today, ultra-nationalists, certainly they should be reined and they should be made to understand, but they are overreacting. You can't compare it with the extremism of Wahhabi extremism. That is very different.
Okay. I think we're running out of time. We already have run out of time. Maybe one last question, and with a short answer, we can then wind up. Go ahead.
Sir.
Hello, sir. Sir, what we conclude
थोड़ा जोर से बोलिए आप मुझे.
sir, what we conclude almost is that Congress is supporting Muslims and okay, so we are just saying Congress is supporting Muslims, right? So I just want to know as a layman as to why they are doing it. What is the reason for them for doing it for so many years and them continuing to do it?
Who? Muslims.
The Congress.
Why is Congress quoting the Muslims and not the Hindus? He's wondering, they're a small part of the population, only a certain very small.
It is
number.
vote bank politics.
Yeah, so is
It's
it
vote
only
bank
about vote
politics.
bank, nothing else?
And now the Congress is more dependent because others are deserting Congress, It has become more. You read my story.
But they've been doing
My
it since...
story on Dailyo, a platform
If they
of
were
India.
political, they would have just gone to the biggest group, quoted them, and they would still win the elections, wouldn't
No,
they?
but here it is shortcut, na? You see, in Delhi,
Yes, sir.
see the kind of appeasement which is taking place in this country. The Delhi government pays the imams a monthly salary.
Yeah, we
Total
know that.
budget is 24 crores. And there are 6 schools in central Delhi where Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad, Zakir Hussain, such people have studied. They are in dire states. The government is not helping those schools. So this is the kind of model we are facing. This came to me as a commissioner actually. Then I came to know,
Okay, thank you. I think.
So Congress is now more and more dependent on
Okay, one
Muslims.
last question.
Thank you, sir.
There is a lady who's not asked the question yet.
I just wanted to ask you, sir, that in today's time is secularism not relevant at all? Because there's too much of talk about, it's just a divide between Hindus and Muslims. Our secular fabric has gone. What do you want to say?
What is it?
She's saying our secular fabric is lost. Is secularism no longer something that we even need to talk about and don't need to discuss? Have I got the question?
moment we bring a justice-based system, when I say that ultra-nationalists have to be controlled, I am talking about that only. There has to be equal treatment for all. those who are indulging in pan-Islamism, they also have to be tackled. And the good Muslims have to be tackled separately. Then and then...
Don't tackle them, just don't tackle them. All right, good. I think it's been a very valuable session. Thank you very much,
I would
everybody,
like
for
to
joining.
take a moment to present our humble gratitude, and I would like to call upon Mr. Prashant Kumar Singh on stage. He is the founder of KLF Awadh Litpreneur. He is a banker, behavioral scientist, writer, and motivator. In our next session, we have some of the finest women leaders of Lucknow. We will take about 5 minutes to begin that session.